A local prosecutor told me it's very hard to prove when a driver is impaired by drugs. There's no drug breathalyzer or swab to figure out if somebody is impaired at that very moment. One of the tools police rely on is a drug recognition expert. But as we found out, their testimony isn't always allowed in court.
Sergeant Deb Batista is confident. She can tell if you're high behind the wheel. She's a certified drug recognition expert in Middleborough. But Batista says some of the most important people in the justice system don't believe she's actually an expert.
How does a judge view a DRE's testimony?
It depends on the judge.
Sergeant Batista says some Massachusetts judges will not even hear what she has to say.
Have I been prepared for trial and they dismissed the case? Yeah.
Drug recognition experts have been used by law enforcement for decades. Officers are trained to administer a 12-step assessment to figure out if you're under the influence of drugs and too impaired to drive. Their observations could mean the difference between whether or not you spend the night behind bars.
To become a drug recognition expert, an officer must complete a 2-week program from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Officers are trained to administer a 12-step assessment to determine drug use and level of impairment. The assessment involves an eye test, a field sobriety test, and reading vital signs like pulse, blood pressure, and temperature. But critics argue DREs are not medically qualified to draw those conclusions. In 2012, a Maryland judge ruled DREs are not sufficiently qualified to render an opinion. Their testimony is not relevant. Here in Massachusetts, the courts have not ruled whether DREs are qualified experts. So some judges allow their witness testimony into court, others don't.
It is totally a lack of consistency.
Well, that's got to make it hard to prosecute these cases.
It is. It is. I mean, we do the best that we can.
How does this impact an OUI drug case when it goes to court? We wanted to find out just how many OUI drug cases never go anywhere. Boston 25 News collected 2 years of data from district attorneys' offices across the Commonwealth. In Essex County, 29% of OUI drug cases were either dismissed, not pursued by the prosecutor, or the driver was found not guilty. That only happened to 12% of OUI cases involving alcohol. In Worcester County, a quarter of their OUI drug cases were thrown out versus only 5% of drunk driving cases. And in Plymouth County, almost half of OUI drug cases were ultimately dismissed, compared to just 14% of alcohol cases.
The science really hasn't caught up to the law.
Michael DelSignore is an OUI defense attorney. He said he often challenges a DRE's testimony in court.
I would file a motion to say the officer doesn't have the experience, the training, that this is basically a police training. They're not doctors, they're not pharmacologists, they can't make this determination.
Right now, there is no national consensus on when a person is too impaired by drugs to drive. There is no device to figure out if somebody is high in that moment.
4 Foxtrot Echo.
Until there is, Sergeant Batista says she will continue to apply the same 12-step assessment that she's administered for 17 years, even if it's not entered into evidence.
You can't get frustrated with what happens. Bottom line is, you got the person off the road, and the roadway was safe, at least for that night.
Right now, there are only around 150 certified DREs here in Massachusetts. If you do the math, that's 1 for every 46,000 residents. Late last year, a special commission on impaired driving recommended doubling that number and is asking the courts to allow DREs to testify as expert witnesses. Jason Law, Boston 25 News.